Well, good morning, Chris. Good morning, Odette. It's
Hello,
lovely to
hello.
see you both.
Morning.
Great to see you.
So this is the last in our new series that we've had for FOP Awareness Day, and that is the Global Conversations. And it's a great opportunity. I hope that you've had an opportunity to meet some new faces from organizations that are serving FOP families around the world. As a global community, we are very much like a family, and there's different people in different parts of the world connecting with those families and serving those families. And so we hope that this has provided you a great opportunity to meet a variety of people and organizations from around the world. So with that, we will just dive in. And maybe we'll start with you, Odette. Your organization, FOP Africa, they've been around since 2011. So tell us a little bit about the founding of FOP Africa. And I know it started with a focus on South Africa. So tell us about that too.
So FOP Africa was started very much by Dr. Chris Scott as a South African organization. And it started really in his radius of diagnosing and identifying patients. And some of that involved actually going, into the literature to find people who'd been diagnosed but weren't known. And so, he started the organization very much as, a family group, right? And ways for people to know that they weren't the only ones with this condition in South Africa. I can't remember, it was a few years ago, given my involvement with FOP and the Tin Soldiers world, I was asked if I would help run it, which I do, which is really a purely administrative, do what we can, keep the organization together and keep it running job. And so that happened, I believe, in 2019 or 2020. And yeah, and very soon we realized that, South Africa is kind of well organized and the community was well connected. But we realized early on that there are all these families in Africa who simply don't have an organization or a community because, there's one person in Morocco and two people in Nigeria. And so we decided to expand the family to make it FOP Africa. And currently we have about 26 active members within our group. We know about more people, but, like with all family and patient organizations, not everyone wants to be active in that, but actively we have 26 families from across Africa in the group.
That's amazing. That's great. And Chris, tell us a little bit. You and your wife, Helen, founded FOP Friends. It has a bigger name than that shares your connection to FOP. So tell us a little bit about the founding of FOP Friends.
Yeah, so we started being proactive in the FOP community not long after my eldest son Oliver was diagnosed with FOP, and that was in 2009. We started out fundraising and set up a website called FOP Friends of Oliver, and it was purely to thank fundraisers who were raising money to fund the research at the time at the University of Oxford. But it wasn't too long after that, after we got a little bit of traction with that we realized that it would be really beneficial to be a charity, and also that a lot more of the community had started connecting with us as a family, as individuals, and all the rest of it. So the Friends of Oliver was dropped, and we became FOP Friends, and formally became a charity back in 2012. So was it 2 years ago now? We celebrate our 10th anniversary. We do all of our work alongside our day jobs, but we've been more or less going from strength to strength. We do an awful lot fundraising wise to keep research going, but we do an awful lot of family support related stuff as well. From really basic stuff, advocating or helping families advocate, making the right connections, signposting information, all of that kind of stuff, right the way through to running a big biennial conference. I learned recently biennial is every 2 years, not biannual, which is twice a year.
Twice a year, yes.
Yeah, would hate that. That would be a big ask doing it twice a year. But on off years, we also try and do a family getaway. So we take all of our UK based, but actually sometimes further afield families away for a family weekend where we actively don't talk about FOP. We just go to be together. And the next one is actually the end of this year, September, where we're taking our families off on safari. Not a South African safari, unfortunately, Odette.
I'm excited when I heard that.
Just a local one.
Yeah.
But
So
it's
Chris,
quite nice because it's all, it's our community has varying needs with regards to mobility. But
Right.
actually, it's really nice because everyone can go into their appropriate forms of transport and drive around a nice safari park, check out the animals and all the rest of it. So it should be a really good weekend.
Chris, sorry to interject. That's so amazing that you've actually created a space where you go away together as a group and not talk about FOP. I think that's really incredible. Interestingly, a little bit conversely, actually, with our communities, because the members are so isolated from countries, as I say, in some places there's only one person. When we hosted a meeting, it was really the only one of its kind to date, and we managed to bring families from across Africa into the same space with expert clinicians from the ICC and the wonderful people from the IFOPA, and their own physicians so that they could learn from the experts. One of the biggest, most striking things that stood out to me personally was that many of those families had never been able to connect with anyone like themselves and had never been able to talk about FOP with anyone else. And the kids, especially, that was like one of the biggest things, was to see children who, for the first time in their lives, met someone else who was like them. So that community, just the simple thing of understanding the other people going through similar things to you is so powerful. And I think that's one of the most important things that community offers in whatever way it arrives, right?
Yeah,
Absolutely.
definitely. That's what we found at the conference is that there's all the really interesting research and meet your doctors and everything, but the most beneficial part was the evening do, where
Yeah,
everyone got to have a drink, socialize, chat together and things. And when I say we don't talk about FOP, we don't plan in talking about FOP. People can still obviously do what they want once they're there, but that's not the aim of the family bit of anyhow. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And about how many families are you connected with? I know you're connected with families in the UK, but also some families across Europe and even some families from other countries.
Yeah, I think, well, UK wise, we're around about 65 families who we are actively in connection with.
That's amazing.
We know there's a few more that the doctors know of that we don't. And as Odette's already mentioned, I think that, people only reach out when they're ready to do so. An
Yes.
FOP diagnosis is a big deal, and everyone has to deal with it in their own time.
yeah,
Yes.
All we try and do is to our doctors or the doctors who are likely to be diagnosing, make sure that they've got information about us as a charity and individuals actually, because quite often it's my Helen who's the one who picks up the phone and chats the new diagnoses. But they just have the information to go, right, okay, you've got this horrible diagnosis, but here's a group who will help you out. If you need to, contact them when you're ready.
yeah. Exactly. And we have the same in our communities. And interestingly, there's some families who just are not ready to connect, and no, are not ready to accept the diagnosis,
Mhm.
and B, are not ready to connect. And that's okay. But, all of those things are okay, but it's important that the physicians that are seeing them know that there's a national organization or an organization on the continent that they can connect to, and then obviously the IFOPA. So we make sure as well that the doctors that we're networked with know to share that information, right?
Absolutely. Well, and even within families, there can be division between families. One parent is ready to embrace it and wants to meet other people and is eager, and the other parent is more standoffish and not quite ready. So yeah, that's the challenge of all of us for running these organizations. You have to be ready and prepared for every scenario and just meet people like where they're at. So yeah.
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 And also,
Oh,
I
sorry.
think I think the fact that FOP is a progressive condition for a parent, I think that's also a very brave step to say, okay, I'm ready to engage with the community and I'm ready for my child to meet a community where people may be in different stages of progression. And I think that takes some hand holding and time. And I think it's important to give people that space.
For
Yeah,
sure.
I was going to say I wasn't ready for it when I first got involved in the FOP world. So one of my first steps was actually joining the board of the IFOPA.
Right.
And that very first meeting in Florida it was when I was going to meet people that I knew were severely impacted by FOP. That was a big deal. I don't know, mentally I don't talk about stuff very often, so it's quite tricky. I don't
Right.
feel like I was ready for it, but I also wanted to make a difference.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I just, right, that's back of my mind. I'm going to go ahead and do this, and
Right.
that's kind of
Right.
where it all started. So.
Well, and one of the things that you all did early on, Chris, was you jumped into fundraising. Fundraising and philanthropy is a cultural norm in the UK. It's not in every country around the world. I think as we've been doing these interviews, we've been hearing that, Australia, it's more of a cultural norm, but in other countries, Germany, Poland, it wasn't. And so you all really jumped in and you started raising money for research. And that's been primarily, it started at the University of Oxford, but you've expanded that. So I think it's always special to talk about, especially this week when we're celebrating the discovery of the gene. The University of Oxford actually had a role to play in helping identify the gene with the University of Pennsylvania. So tell us a little bit about the research work you funded at the at University of Oxford and other places, how that's expanded.
Yeah, so when we first got involved, it's one of those things where you're given this diagnosis and you look around and you say, what can I do?
Right.
So, and funding research was one of the few things that we could actively make a difference to at the
Right.
start. And we were lucky we had a local research team in the UK in Oxford. So we started doing that, and it's started out funding pretty much basic research. There was a small team already there that had been supported by families prior to our arrival, but also by a businessman in Scotland whose wife had a child in her class with FOP, who then took it on board as almost a lifelong, we will support this cause. And yeah, it's been basic research, but it's evolved. So a few years back, the team at Oxford gained access to a whole load of compounds that they were able to screen. And they found through their work that one of them was a really, really good at stopping FOP, which has now been taken into a clinical trial, the Stop FOP clinical trial, an academic trial, so it's not pharmaceutical sponsored.
Right.
And that kind of continues. And the team continues to look into FOP as a whole, but also tries to focus on finding other pathways that could be targeted to stop FOP. And also sometimes the wider picture as well. What else? Because FOP bone growth is one of the big things, but there's other stuff around it that's going on as well, and trying to look in those things.
Right.
And the team have actually done some interesting collaborations with cancer charities, because it turns out that the FOP gene is also faulty, shall we say, in a particular type of childhood brain cancer and some other things. So it's a lot of collaborations, not just with us as FOP organizations around the world, but also actually the researchers all collaborate together as well. When we got a little bit luckier, every now and again, we get lucky with fundraising now and again, and that kind of helps to fill up the coffers. And we're pretty good at managing and planning that, which means that we've been able to not only fund the University of Oxford for the last 12 years, but also invest in some other projects with the IFOPA, such as gene therapy, the Act for FOP grants and that kind of thing. And that just, our ultimate goal is to find a treatment or a cure for FOP, and that just helps us do it. But because the IFOPA is a bigger organization than us, and it has a medical advisory board and scientific and all of that kind of stuff, it lets us concentrate on what we're good at and put our money somewhere that we know has been researched and is likely to be beneficial. So yeah, it means we don't have to do our own legwork on scientific advisory boards and all the rest of it, and search for researchers and that kind of stuff. So it's
a great partnership.
It's it's really good. And the other part of we've been particularly lucky, and this is slightly off topic, but all of our fundraised money has gone into research. All of the family support that we do, we've managed to do through grants and trusts, which is something that's quite common in the UK for projects. So we'll write a school book, or we'll get funding for the family weekend that we're about to do, or we managed to get funding for our conferences or merchant, all that kind of stuff we've managed to do, without actually dipping into anything where our community has gone out and fundraised for us.
That's amazing.
I think the only thing that we take out of it is the cost of merchandise. So T-shirts and fundraising platforms. I think we're at like 98% of fundraised money and actually goes to its end cause, which is good. And fingers crossed we can keep it going. It's hard to keep it going because we do have the boring overheads as well.
Right.
Um,
No.
but yeah, we've been pretty lucky with regards to that.
So,
No.
if I can describe the fundraising scenario in the South African and African context, is that so on a macro level, our countries are burdened with communicable conditions, right? So HIV, TB, et cetera, et cetera. So it's incredibly difficult to fundraise. And unlike European and American countries, we don't get government subsidies or government grants, really. So fundraising towards research in the African context is like pretty impossible. And over and above that, our families have very immediate needs. So very immediate, like, for example, one of the families that we've just welcomed into our group come from Kenya, adult person with FOP. The father died, the mum has epilepsy, the sister, who's the main caregiver, is unemployed, and he has no mobility at all and doesn't even have a basic normal wheelchair, much less a motorized wheelchair. So what we do in terms of fundraising, which has to come from individuals, we don't, it's like ask our community. And so we've realized that one of our biggest needs through the community is a wheelchair, and not, as everyone knows, FOP people with FOP don't need a normal wheelchair; they need specialized wheelchairs, and those need to be fitted, and they need to be motorized, and they need all sorts of things that isn't just like picking one off a shelf. So we've started a wheelchair fund to be able to cater for those needs. And then that involves logistics. Like this family, it means sending someone to Kenya, measuring that person up, custom making the appropriate chair, and then getting it to them. So our fundraising efforts are really focused on, what is as possibly tangible as possible to those families, and the wheelchair fund makes that something that everyone can apply for and hopefully access. But the other thing that's really been incredible for our families, and thanks to the IFOPA is available, are the Life Awards, because many of our community members don't live in a home that's made of brick and mortar. They live in tin shacks. They don't have toilets within the home. So, saying, oh, we can get a ramp to a toilet is great, except there's no toilet. So, simple things like adaptive tools and other things that are made available both from FOP Africa and through the IFOPA are life-changing. So one of the mothers from Nigeria, her son is good news, and she wrote to us about how life-changing it was. Yes, so she said, I'm the mother of an FOP warrior, and learning about FOP and becoming connected to the FOP Africa community has helped both my son and me so much. If I hadn't known the condition or this community, my son, good news, would still be struggling with basic tasks like eating, dressing, cleaning up after using the toilet, bathing, and more. Now, all of these things are possible thanks to the connection, the advice, and the adaptive tools from the FOP community. I feel happy, grateful, and also relieved. And relief is such that a mother feels relief just because her child has a tool to work with. And that's, and it's a common thing in Africa. We say it takes a village to raise a child. And I think in the FOP community and in the community, certainly of people with musculoskeletal conditions and any condition, it takes a village. And this is why this connection, not just with your own community, but with national organizations and international organizations, and is so crucial. It is so crucial. So Temba, he's 21 just recently, and he was diagnosed many years ago, but only recently connected to community through some efforts by another organization. So he says that being part of the FOP community has given me a sense of belonging and support. It's helped me feel less isolated and more empowered to advocate for awareness and research.
That's amazing. And is Timba the one who came through to the
Yes,
FOP Africa meeting. That was you like found him and he was there later that week. And
exactly. We found him literally that week and he
soldiers
came through. And it was
identified.
like the first time he'd met anyone else with FOP was at the Cape Town meeting. And so I'd like to also share something from Abdel Ghaffar, who is in Morocco. He's an adult with FOP. He's the only known person in Morocco, although according to literature, there are more people. But he says that being part of the FOP Africa community means so much to me. It's given me a sense of hope I didn't even realize I was missing. Just knowing I'm not alone and there are others who truly understand what it feels like is incredibly comforting. That connection has made such a difference in my life. So this is coming from Flora, a South African mom. Her daughter is Wandle. You've met her, I'm sure. She says, finding out my daughter's FOP was heartbreaking and a relief at the same time. Knowing is much more than not knowing what you're dealing with. In our FOP Africa community, we have found knowledge, hope, and the strength to adjust to our challenging journey. Kaya says, from the very beginning, Tin Soldiers and FOP Africa have helped so many families, most importantly by easing the isolation they felt for years, and for that we are very grateful. We also deeply appreciate the medical fraternity for their research time and dedication, all of which contributed to trials becoming a reality in South Africa. And there is one more, which, this is from Dakudidi in Kenya. This is the new family. I'm happy to be part of the FOP family. We come from a vulnerable family with limited means. Our mother's epileptic, our father passed when we were young, and now we just feel less alone.
So we know that you all are very closely connected with the families, and you do that in a variety of ways. We've talked a little bit about the family meetings and how at times those are every other year, or for FOP Africa, there's, I think, been just the one meeting. We know that some families from Africa did get to go to a meeting in Brazil back in 2018, but those are very special opportunities. Chris, you shared a little bit about your get-togethers, just the social events, but I know like through WhatsApp and other means, you all stay really connected to families. So Chris, maybe do you want to start and share a little bit about that?
Yeah, so we've got we try and utilize as many different methods of keeping connected as possible, because one method that works brilliantly for some doesn't necessarily work for others.
Right.
We have the usual kind of outbound information through social media, Facebook, Instagram, those kind of things, where we're just telling people, informing people the latest news and trends, news and clinical trials, all of that kind of stuff, what's going on. But then we do have a private WhatsApp group that we
great.
have for our UK community and a little beyond. There's a few in Ireland, Northern Ireland, and Australia, randomly, who are also in our UK WhatsApp group. And that's kind of a little bit more conversational. Everyone kind of chats together. We use it for putting information out as well, nowhere near as much as in social, or perhaps when we need to request help ourselves, which happens occasionally. But also just to kind of go along and chat and share advice in a very private forum. And that came along more recently. Before that, we all had the Facebook groups. The private Facebook groups, there's support for FOP, the mums group, there's a dad's group, there's a ladies group, and all of that kind of thing, where people get to chat. That's not done by us, of course. That's a community thing, but that's where we can also chat together, learn from each other, and disseminate information, which is quite nice. The other thing that we do from a communications point of view is we go old school with newsletters. Written, I think it's every once a quarter, I think we do it. A newsletter that goes out in the post. It's like coffee table reading for people. Get off your screens and actually sit and read what we've been up to and what others in the community have been up to. That seems to work really nicely, not only for informing our community, but also for when people are doing events. It's actually, we hand out a whole load of them, and people who are actually coming to support others in our community themselves can find out what's going on as well. So that really works quite nicely as well. Other than that, the kind of standard tech stuff.
Right.
MailChimp, mail shots,
Phone, actually having a phone
all of
call.
that. Because
Right.
the phone calls tend to be the other way around. They tend to be inbound.
Okay, interesting.
When people need something urgently, or when they can't get a hold of a doctor that they really need to get hold of, or they've got a problem, it tends to be inbound, the phone calling stuff.
Yeah.
We did plan, and a few years back we had not an intern, she actually worked for us for a little while, a young lady called Hannah, who actually touched base with patients now and again, more
Yeah.
proactively. At the minute, we're not doing that, but we are thinking about going ahead and trying to do that again.
No, that's great.
yeah.
That's great. Yeah. So Odette, I know that there's lots of challenges, distance, connectivity in Africa. So talk to us. I think the WhatsApp group is one of your big places that you all stay connected.
Yeah, so the WhatsApp group is really it. I mean, we have the Facebook page as well, but the WhatsApp group is really where everyone connects. And I mean, it is also where we share information and updates and resources, but it's also where everyone says happy birthday. And it's so interesting, like everyone knows when everyone's birthday is. And sometimes it's just people share a picture from where they're at the moment. And I mean, I now live in Switzerland, so I share pictures of the mountain and other people share pictures. So it is just a little family space. And what I love is every time we introduce someone new to the space, how welcoming everyone is. So the WhatsApp group is kind of our thing as a platform. But then also to Chris's point, a lot of when we get the direct WhatsApps and the direct calls, it is when a family needs something responsive, and that's often around a medical situation and then someone is there at any time, whether it's Christmas Eve or whatever, like someone is there for that. And it's quite difficult to think that you're doing enough, but I think that the fact that there is someone at the end of a call or a message is often more than what we think it's worth, right? So coming to barriers, in the African communities, I think I touched on it earlier, there are just really bigger barriers to care. They're bigger barriers to even getting to a GP in a place where there aren't any. There's like one general practitioner per 100,000 people. So, your access to care is that much more difficult. Your access to being able to get Wi-Fi on a phone or any of that, they're just bigger barriers, and language barriers as well. I mean, we all think, English is something everyone speaks, but it isn't, or writes or has access to a smartphone. So these are just additional barriers that we have working with our community. But one thing I'm always humbled by is that our community just takes things that we would see as insurmountable, in us living in our nice homes and everything that would see as insurmountable, and they just overcome. So as much as there are huge barriers and almost insurmountable lack of resources and access, almost in equal measure, there is love and hope and connection. And I think that connection of community, like I tried to share with those messages, is just something that you can't put a value to in a way. And along that vein, there's one more that came from Anasipo. So Anasipo is one of the first, in fact, among the first people I ever met with FOP. She was Dr. Chris Scott's first patient ever. He'd never come across FOP, and this
Dr.
child
Scott actually brought Anasipo to our meeting in Manchester. It was fantastic. And she was insane. She was running around like a lunatic. I don't know how her mom dealt with it.
Yeah, and he spoke about that as well. He's like, it's like, oh, we've got a rapper and was running around at airports and everything. So, I mean, when for those who don't know, I'm a journalist, and in 2010 did a story about FOP, and I met Anasipo through that story, and she was very young. She was 4 or 5 at the time. And she's grown into this lovely, young, vivacious young woman who still has the same, we say in Afrikaans, gees, means spirit, as I think she had when you met her. And this is what she wrote when I asked the community if they wanted to share anything. So she said, I was diagnosed when I was 5, and I was very sad to hear the news. My mom also, she was heartbroken. But I'm so glad to be a part of the FOP community. That's where we share our problems and get advice and love from others.
Mm.
So that's Anna Siebel's message.
Yes, no, that's so precious. Well, maybe share a little bit. We've talked about some of the program priorities that you each have. Odette, maybe share a little bit about some of the things you mentioned, access to care, some of the things that are a priority for your organization, FOP Africa.
So access to care is always a really important thing. And so and I think this is true of the whole FOP community globally, is that we're so lucky to have access to the world's leading experts in the ICC, for example. And certainly in South Africa, we have, and in all of the African countries in which we have patients, we have physicians who are not only versed in FOP, but care about going that extra bit and being available during emergencies and whatever. So our job is to really make sure that that connection is robust, and a part of that, it becomes my mantra a little bit with the community, is to really encourage the community to make sure that they have primary health care around them, so that if there's a flare-up, they're not going, oh, I need to get hold of ICC expert X, Y, or Z, that they can go to their primary healthcare physician, their GP, or like in some cases a nurse, but mostly a GP or a pediatrician, and go, this is what I'm struggling with. And then that healthcare practitioner has access to an expert. So in the African context, we are that conduit, but as much as being the conduit, you've also got to make sure that people surround themselves with their own reliable resources. So that's a lot of what we do. It's like, it's fine to phone me at whatever time and for me to try and connect you, but you need a physician who is there where you are, who can physically see your child and then connect with to an expert if they need them. So that's a really important thing. The other thing that's important, and clinical trials are now in South Africa. When we started 5 years ago with this, we were told quite blatantly that clinical trials were unlikely to ever come to Africa, and now there are 2 in South Africa. So another really important thing for us to do is help educate families and people with FOP around clinical trials, that it's not a cure, that, all those things that's important for them to understand. And also in access. So we have some fairly specific and unusual complications that come with trying to get people from a rural village, for example, to the actual center. So, there we try and facilitate as well.
Right. That's amazing. And Chris, I know, some of the same issues. We think like, oh, in Africa, yes, that makes sense that, difficult, you got to find a doctor in your local country. But, in the US, it's from state to state, from Missouri to Kansas to Georgia. We have that same challenge. And I think that's something that you've identified in the UK, is identifying more physicians and more locations for potential clinical trials. So talk to us a little bit about your work in that area.
I think that's probably common just globally as an issue, that we all need a little bit more localized support
Right.
when it comes to caring for us and our community from a healthcare point of view. And that's from your doctors, your local GPs, to your doctors, to, really importantly, and always comes up, your dentists.
Right.
So we're kind of trying to similarly grow networks of individuals who are there to help.
Right.
We're only a little country, but we still have similar issues that, our different NHS trusts don't talk to each other properly. They won't refer. It's a postcode lottery, all of those kind of things going on. So we just try and figure out ways to level the playing field for everyone. I think it's probably a good way of trying to make sure that everyone can get the care that they need when they need it, which is the tricky thing.
Exactly.
We have interesting situations where even something as basic as getting hold of prednisone, one GP will prescribe it, and let you have it on the shelf. Another GP won't, because it's high dose,
Really?
and they'll go, yeah, no, you're not having it. And then we've got
Wow.
to get involved with our more FOP experts go, no, this is fine to give this person it. And actually, more than that, you need to give them it really quickly if they've had a fall or an injury or knock or something. It's like, so it's trying to level that playing field. It's a lot of the time it's throwing mud at a wall and seeing what sticks. Is trying to figure out how you find people, how you engage people. Every conference year we try and bring in new clinicians and doctors to say, right, you're really interested, or they've suddenly found themselves with an FOP patient. We go, oh, right, you really want to come along and learn a bit more, don't you?
Right.
So just trying to grow those kind of networks.
Yeah.
I think it's there's so much to talk about in it, so much to do. It's
Right.
overwhelming. But I think I try and condense it down, and this covers more than just the clinicians into what we try to do. So if you take out research and clinical trials and all of that kind of stuff, which is essentially trying to give hope, there's a future where FOP is an inconvenience and not a major issue,
Right.
versus the other side of it, which is essentially making the journey as good as it possibly can be for everyone.
Right.
Exactly.
And that's kind of it's not a mantra, it's the wrong thing, but that's how I describe it quite often. And it encompasses all those things that are from making sure that people can go to school and be
Right.
productive in the workplace, have as much as is possible the same opportunities as everybody else,
Right.
and has access to the relevant healthcare.
Yeah.
And it's all fun and games, and it's even more fun and games when we start talking about transitioning from childhood to adulthood and all of that kind of stuff, which we're actually starting now with our Oliver.
It's
And
a challenge.
it's our local hospital appears we're at the start of this to be pretty good at it.
That's
But
great.
quite often, when you hit adulthood, you're dealt symptoms. Each individual symptom is dealt with, and you're not looked at as a whole any longer.
Right.
So trying to figure out and find teams that do that for us. As a kid, you get a pediatrician who looks at the whole picture and kind of
Right.
manages everybody, but you lose all of that.
Right.
So fun and games.
Chris, I know
I digress slightly there. Sorry.
No, that's great. That's great. It's all part of the
But
things.
it's real. It's real. So we have adults who really that their primary source, they still go to the pediatrician because that's still the person who knows who they are as a whole.
They're willing to watch, watch and
And
care
they're
for them.
willing, to watch and refer to the right people, obviously, but it's still that touch point of someone who knows this person as a whole human.
But that actually speaks to what you said before as well, Odette. I mean, we are, as an FOP community, a strong, supportive community, pretty positive, motivated. Don't let, I've forgotten how you described it now, but overcome the odds, shall we say.
Yeah.
But actually, you can extend that to our doctors. Because I don't
Right.
know what it is about FOP, but when we hook in a doctor, a clinician, a researcher, or anything, they are pretty much with us for life.
Yeah, exactly. So it's about finding champions. And you said earlier, Chris, it's about throwing the mud at the wall and see what sticks. And for some clinicians, for some GPs, whatever, this patient is just going to be too difficult. It's not going to be, come in and I tell you what the problem is and I give you an antibiotic or whatever. It's much more of a commitment. So we look for champions and we call them champions. These are the clinicians who are willing to just go, okay, this patient, this person, this family are going to need more of what I normally give in a 20-minute consultation. And they're there. Champions are there everywhere. It's just finding them, and then those are the ones who stay with you.
Absolutely.
We've mentioned him a few times, but Dr. Scott.
He's one of them.
Yes.
Yep. It was like, okay, well, can you take this person to me? Oh, hi there, Tozy. How are you doing? Oh,
exactly.
bumped into him in Italy and America. It's like, the commitment is phenomenal when you find.
And I think FOP is one of those conditions. I mean, in my work as a journalist, I've explored done various stories about various things, and there's two, FOP and motor neuron disease, where clinicians will say things like, in motor neuron disease, the one clinician said to me, it's like you get the M&D bug. Right. And when it bites you, you can't help but want to do something for these people and for their families because they show you the best of what there is in humanity. And I think that is true also of FOP. And I'm one of those people. I don't have a family member affected by FOP. I made a film about it, and the FOP bug bit. And I think that's true of clinicians as well. You've just got to find those that get bitten.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, Chris, I know you all have a lot of partnerships with other rare disease organizations in the UK, but also kind of in Europe. And so talk a little bit about how that helps support your work, especially as you're working to raise awareness of FOP and find more healthcare providers.
I think largely actually that working with the larger organizations allows us to punch a little bit further above our weight. So when you start getting involved in conversations as clinical trials are going through, conversations about access to drugs and who's going to pay for this and how you're going to get it, all the really dull policies and procedures and market access and all that kind of stuff that as a small organization doing it by yourself, you don't stand a chance.
Exactly.
But you have these larger organizations, which are essentially networks of us smaller organizations who can do that extra step, who will go to governments and lobby, who will attend the many, many meetings about this stuff and have that voice on our behalf. So that's probably one of the biggest things that let's call them umbrella organizations give us.
Yes.
And we are members of Eurydice, even though we're no longer in Europe, and that's a big thing. There's big changes through Europe with regards to health technology access going on in the next few years, which Eurydice will champion for all of our national FOP organizations within Europe, which is fantastic. Again, an umbrella organization doing what you need. But then we've also got one in the UK called Beacon for Rare Diseases, used to be called Find a Cure, which is actually an organization that exists to support small rare disease organizations.
Yes.
And they provide training and upskilling, strategic plan, all of that kind of stuff to help us small organizations grow, develop, to fundraise, to put your money in the right place, to research, to support everyone. So they do make a big, big difference, and they do they try to lift some of the load, but actually they do let us kind of go beyond our normal circles of influence and operation.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And I know that 10 Soldiers, they work really hard to really, that's where the awareness focus is. I mean, I know some of the families are probably in FOP Africa are doing their own sort of awareness activities, but really the load of the awareness activities in Africa really that's where 10 Soldiers got its start and then it's expanded. So talk a little bit because there's awareness and then there's the healthcare, the Clinical Champions Alliance. So tell us a little bit about those two.
Okay, so just for clarity for everyone, I wear two hats. The one is that on a voluntary basis, I basically organize FOP Africa, and in that space, we're just a voluntary organization, and we really try and serve the community as much as possible with very little bandwidth for awareness and other things that need funding. Tin Soldiers is a registered nonprofit, both in the States and in South Africa, and I'm in leadership in that. And their job really is to drive diagnosis, raise awareness, and drive medical education. So that's a job that they do globally. But in South Africa is where the organization sort of grew from, and that's our home territory. So that is where our biggest awareness work has happened, from documentary films to PSAs, and really a big outreach to educating healthcare professionals. So, for example, right now there's a musculoskeletal screening pilot project on the go, working with clinics, local clinics in communities where the nurses are educated and empowered about how to screen for musculoskeletal conditions, specifically for FOP. And so, there's a lot of awareness happening in that space, which hopefully becomes replicable and sustainable, not just in South Africa, but throughout the continent and in other areas of the world, particularly in underserved communities. So, there's a lot of ongoing work in that space. But then also FOP Africa specifically, we also created handbooks, and this is where I'd like to talk about how important it is for national patient support organizations to collaborate. So it became clear to us that our families and the educators of kids with FOP and, their communities needed education from what to do at home to what to do in a school environment, etc. And already FOP Friends had a great resource. IFOPA has many resources. So a couple of years ago, we all we spoke to them and collaborated in creating these handbooks that took the knowledge that already exists and all the resources that was already created to make those resources available and worked to adapt those to our environments. And that's been very powerful for our community. So it's important to raise awareness outside, obviously, the silo, but it's also important to drive awareness within the community. And where we can collaborate around resources, it's really important. And when it works wonderfully. And that's an example of that.
Absolutely. No, that's true. And Chris, talk a little bit, we've mentioned it a couple times, but for those who don't know, talk a little bit about the school guidebook.
Yeah, that was the book that we collaborated on. Yeah.
Yeah, so it was a few years back. I think it was my Helen had the idea of developing a guidebook that handheld FOP families through education. My Helen's a teacher or was a teacher at primary school, and it goes from actually before primary school, because you need to start preparing for this kind of stuff even before then.
Yes.
Right the way through the education process in the UK EHCP care plans. There's various acronyms for the same thing across the world.
Right.
And adaptations you can do in school, what is safe, what is not, how to deal with if you have a carer for your child at school, what would be the best advice to deal with that? Don't, move away when it's safe to do so, so you're not impacting friendships and all of that kind of thing. But then actually it takes you right the way through the higher education systems, the college to university, and then theoretically out the other side. So it's quite a nice guidebook, and it's another one of those guidebooks where it's quite substantial,
Yes.
but it's in sections. So you go, okay, right, I'm interested in primary school, right? I need to know about this now, or I'm interested in high school and that kind of thing. So it's a nice resource, and we've been recently working on it. I think we've done it. A version of it in Brazil. We collaborated with FOP Brazil on that one, and we're currently working on a Chinese version, collaborating with FOP China, and two actual Chinese students who came to us through Manchester University, who've taken that on board. They're working with Stephen, the leader of FOP China, on that version. We're looking at doing, I'm going to say Spanish, potentially French.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, not entirely sure how we're fitting it all in. That's the royal we. It's definitely not me doing this thing. But it is collaboration is the key, and we've had, Odette's mentioned already that we've, repurposed, collaborated on stuff. It's we've had other national organizations come to us and say, oh, well, we really like that. Would you mind if?
Yes.
And not at all.
Yeah.
And that works really, really, really quite nicely. It's quite tricky because it is a big old tomb of work, but it's definitely beneficial, and it's a good.
Yeah. So that exact resource was what inspired us to create something for the FOP Africa community, and Helen was incredibly gracious in saying, use it as a resource, and it's helped formed what we did. So I do think that there's great power in collaboration and adapting what works in one community for another.
Yeah. Right. And as Odette has said, there's a lot of the challenges that we face are common.
Yes.
There's bits that need tweaking, obviously, for each country or each situation, but there's an awful lot of what we face as a community is consistent.
Yeah, when I was at the FOP Africa meeting a few years ago, I was on the phone with a dad from Texas talking about how do we find him a dentist in the state of Texas. And it's the same. It really is around the world. So, well, as we wrap up, I know that this is Awareness Month. And so maybe Odette, do you want to start by sharing, is there one message that you would share with the global community on Awareness Day?
So what I'd like to share is, I think, just a message that is potentially a universal truth. And that is when we are faced with things that seem impossible, it's almost the simplest to say, I don't know what to do, and so I will do nothing. But I like to look at things that seem impossible and say that the very word itself says, I'm possible. And that if each and every one of us just do a little something, not even knowing where it will land, it might create a ripple that creates a wave that ends up having an impact that you might not know. So my message is that impossible just means I'm possible. Just see it that way.
That's great. That's great. And Chris, what about for you?
I don't know, but I'm going to step off camera for one moment because Odette's
Okay.
I've just glanced to my left.
Okay.
Fuck, that wasn't too long. This is something that Helen got me a few years back.
Oh,
The difference
There you
between the
go.
impossible and the possible is determination. I love it.
Yep.
I love it. Well, and I think that's so true for our families. Yeah, that's amazing. Whether you're a parent or a caregiver or the person living with a disease or a sibling, that really that really resonates. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks for bringing that up, Odette. Yeah.
I don't. I'm terrible with inspiring words and all that kind of
she
stuff.
put us on the
Oh, we're
spot, though.
inspired by
She
your
didn't tell us
actions,
to think of
Chris.
anything inspiring.
Inspired by your actions and all that you guys have accomplished, since 2012. And so, yeah, no, it's great. Well, thank you both for spending time with me today and for talking a little bit about your organizations and about the families that live in your community and for sharing their stories. We're all in this together. I think, the theme is stronger together this month. And it is true. I hope that you've seen from the conversation today that is truly how we all live this out. So thank you so much for your time.
And thank you for everything that you do, and Chris as well, everyone. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for having us.
Yes.
Well, lovely to see you both.